At the doorway, the fingers of one hand twisting raw wool into a tight yarn, and those of the other winding it onto a peg. She keeps an eye on the street, on her wandering young son. I think my initial attraction to this poem came out of its tight symmetry, 5 stanzas, 4 lines each, the first 3 lines of which all have 4 syllables, the last 1 syllable. And its sound patterns moving from fingers to twisting to tight to winding to wandering. The sharp image work, the raw wool turning into yarn, the doorway giving way to the street. Even the woman's body, its parts seemingly working independently of each other in what we might call multitasking, is symmetrical. The fingers of one hand twisting raw wool while those of the other hand are winding it onto a peg. And it's wound into a tight yarn, which can also be a long story. So there's a second shadow image of the woman at her domestic work, talking, spinning a yarn. While she keeps one eye on the street, presumably her other eye is on the wool. Everything about the woman is doing 2 things at once. And while the wool becomes a tight yarn and she's winding it, her young son is wandering, echoing winding. And in fact, we can almost compress wandering into winding. And in a way, he is also winding, in the sense that the word can mean to take a twisting movement or course. He's winding through the street. But in another sense, he's doing the opposite of winding, because as she winds that yarn around the peg, he is wandering away from her, unwinding himself, becoming unfixed, away. She's at the doorway, in a liminal and domestic space, an entrance and an exit, but both inside and outside. He is on the street, a public space and a larger space, away to somewhere. I suppose one could also see as significant that the woman is on the border of this private space, doing the work of the home while looking outside of it, and the son is out in the public sphere. There's the metaphorical tether of the yarn, invisible apron strings fastening to the boy to this woman. But that tether is only a metaphor. It can't keep more than her eye on him. Well, maybe her mind, too. She can turn one thing into another, raw wool into tight yarn, but he is turning into something else, too. The freedom of wandering makes possible his own inevitable transformation into someone not young, into someone not raw, into someone out of eyeshot. I said before that my initial attraction to this poem came out of its symmetry, and that's true. But I'm also very interested in art depicting women working. The woman in this poem is doing the obvious domestic work of making yarn, but she's also doing the less visible, maybe even invisible work of watching her child. I'm interested in how Corman makes an image of this invisible action. We can see or keep an eye on him, but the invisible action is a doubled one, keeping an eye while letting him wander, in the same way her hands can do 2 things at once. I mentioned earlier that every element of the poem is symmetrical, and I admire how Corman has written this moment of her work in which everything about the woman is doing 2 things at once, doing and thinking, and made it into a single, complex image of that simultaneity. This is a stunning moment of perception which traces that image from her fingers in the doorway to her wandering son. Thank you.